Welcome to the third and final part of the narrated PowerPoint for Chapter 5, Theories of Motivation. As I mentioned in the second part, Part 3 focuses on process-based theories. We're going to start with Adams' equity theory. Equity theory is one of my favorites. Adams publishes this theory in 1965, and what's cool is that it continues to be incredibly useful for helping us to understand why people do what they do in organizations. Equity theory is concerned with fairness. Fairness is something that matters a lot to adults. Now, before I dive into what you're seeing on this slide, I want to talk a little bit about what equity is versus what equality is. The best way I know to explain this is to rely on something that I know many of you would have personal experience with. Not necessarily everybody, but no worries, no worries. Everyone will be able to track, even if you haven't had the personal experience. At least some of you were raised in the tradition where you celebrated Christmas. Not everybody, of course, but at least some of you. I know that growing up in my family, we celebrated Christmas. Some of you also have siblings. I'm the oldest of 7. And for us, Christmas every year when I was a kid worked pretty much the same way. Christmas morning, that's when we would get to open our gifts. So we would get up, usually a lot earlier than our parents wanted us to be up, quite frankly. Get up, go to the tree, excited to see what was under the tree. And then we would count. Okay, these are mine. 1, 2, 3. But we wouldn't just count our own, of course. We wanted to know how the other kids had fared. 1, 2, 3. How about over here? 1, 2, 3. Of course, what we were very concerned about was that no one got more gifts than we did. Kids don't understand value. But as soon as they can count, they understand equal. They don't necessarily understand equitable, where maybe one kid might have only gotten 2 gifts, but the value of those gifts was approximately the same as another kid's 4 gifts. Instead, kids look at 4 and they go, 4 is more than 2. You got more than I did. How come you got more than I did? Again, no understanding of value. So they can't process what equity is. Equity is all about what's fair in terms of value. As it says on the slide, fairness happens when the outcome to input ratio is similar to the outcome to input ratio of a comparison person, what we call a referent other. What? Just look at what you see. Think about yourself on the left. Your outcomes to your inputs. What you get compared to what you give. This is just for you. What you get compared to what you give. And then compared to what somebody else, your referent other, the person with whom you are comparing yourself, what they get versus what they give. So in the Christmas example, how many or what value their gifts versus how good they were compared with what you got versus how good you were. We are always, always, always comparing our outcomes to inputs to other people's outcomes to inputs. Quick example. You've got a great friend who happens to be taking one of the same classes as you are. You study your butt off for this exam. Your friend, not so much, barely studies. You get your grades back. Do you want to know what that person got for a grade? Odds are yes. Odds are yes. You discover, horror of horrors, that even though that person studied less than you, they got a better grade than you did. What? That doesn't even make sense, is what you'll be thinking. One thing for sure you're likely to think is, that's not fair. That is a perfect example where the ratio of outputs to inputs favors that other person rather than being equal. I'll clarify this further. Inputs are the contributions that we feel we're making. So our gift, our give. Outcomes are the rewards, the get. And a referent, when we talk about a referent other, this could be another person or even a category of people. Let's get real specific. In the workplace, outcomes include things like pay, perks, like where we get to park, whether we have a window office or not, opportunities to be promoted, and praise, recognition. What we give, the inputs, include things like our experience, our expertise, our credentials, seniority, how long we've been in a job, our effort, and our age. Now, of these inputs, which one, and it's only one, which one of these can a person relatively easily change? There's only one. If you answered effort, you're right. You're right. So how does this all play out? Well, actually, I want to go back. I want to go back here. 2 slides. Let's go back here. Let's look at this outcomes to input. Now, let me do an example and pull out a piece of paper so that you can play along for this example. I want you to imagine, let's take me. We'll take me. And we'll say that I'm the self, okay? And I'm just going to use the outcome of pay. And I'm going to make up numbers here, all right? Let's say that I make 100,000. So write down 100,000, okay? And then on the bottom, the give, I'm going to give myself like a score of, let's see, what would be good? I'm going to give myself a score of 5, okay? So in considering everything, my experience, my expertise, my seniority, my age, my credentials, my effort, I give myself a 5 on a scale of 0 to 9, let's say. All right. Now, what's important to recognize here is none of these numbers have to be real, ever. Not just for this example, but ever. What I mean by that is we don't necessarily know what another person's salary is, and we don't necessarily know what the real input number might be. But guess what? We invent one. We do this all the time. So let's continue with my example. So again, just sticking with pay as my outcome, and as I evaluate all my inputs, I say, they're about worth a 5. So I've got now 100 over 5, all right, which is 20. Now let's say that I'm going to compare myself with someone, a referent other. Who might I compare myself with? Well, I'd probably pick another professor, right? I mean, that would make a lot of sense. And most likely, I would pick a professor who's in my same field, business. So let's say I pick Dr. Joy Paul. Dr. Paul and I have a lot in common. Uh, that's why I would most likely pick her as a referent other. The person we're going to choose as a referent other is typically someone with whom we think we have a fair amount in common. Otherwise, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to compare ourselves with that other person, right? I'm not going to compare myself with a student. When I was a student, I would have, but not now that I'm a professor. I'm not going to compare myself with the president of the college, Dr. Brees. I'm not a president or a higher level administrator. I'm a professor. So most likely I'm going to pick another professor. So like I said, let's say I pick Dr. Joy Paul. And let's say that I imagine her salary to be higher than mine. Again, I don't need to know the actual number. People make stuff up all the time. So I imagine that she makes more than me, and I say, oh, I'll bet she makes like 120,000. Now, remember, I'm making these numbers up, okay, folks? I don't actually know what Dr. Paul makes, and the number I gave you for me is not the actual number. It doesn't matter what the actual number is. So remember, mine was 100 over 5, and I say that Dr. Paul, 120 over, and when I think about her experience, her expertise, her credentials, her seniority, her effort, her age, et cetera, I value all of that at a 6. Now, notice, I'm not asking Dr. Paul what she thinks, ever. This is all in my head. Are you with me? This is all my perception. So I give her 120 over 6, which is equal to what? 20. Glory. Basically, I would perceive that I was being treated equitably by St. Norbert College when I compared myself with Dr. Paul. Now, you might think to yourself, well, wait a minute, she's making more money than you are. Yes, she is. And in my mind, given the way that I perceive her inputs, she deserves to make more money. Maybe she's working harder than I am. Maybe she has a higher credential than I do. Maybe she has more experience than I do. Is everybody tracking with me? So, yeah, I'm totally okay with the fact that she makes more money. She should, in my mind. Now, what if Dr. Paul made the same amount as me? 100,000. And remember, I valued my inputs at 5, and I continue to value her inputs at 6. Now the ratio is no longer equal, it's unequal. There are two different ways that I might perceive that inequity. On the one hand, remember 100 over 6 for her, 100 over 5 for me. On the one hand, I might think, well, that's awesome. I'm getting a better deal. I deserve it just because I'm awesome. That's one possibility. Another possibility is I might feel, can you guess? Can you guess the other possible feeling? I'll bet some of you have. I might feel guilty. I might think to myself, ooh, she really should be making more than I do. After all, she works harder than I do. She's been doing this longer. She's better at it. She should get paid more. Oof, now I feel guilty. So my two options are I feel like I'm awesome or I feel guilty. Both a function of this inequity. Now, what if she was making 150,000 instead of 120 or 100 and still over 6? Or 180,000 over 6, whereas I'm getting 100 over 5. I'm going to feel like I'm getting screwed, right? It's not going to feel fair. But again, it's not just because she's making more, it's the ratio that matters. At that point, I would decide, well, that wasn't fair. She's getting paid way more than she's worth. Are you with me? So again, it's not the raw numbers that matter, it's the ratio. And again, these are the outcomes and the inputs that we'd be comparing. And again, the one that a person can easily or most easily influence is effort. So what happens when we perceive unfairness? Well, here are on this slide some different ways that we can deal with that unfairness. We might distort perceptions, change our thinking so that we believe our referent other is actually more skilled than maybe we thought before. So they do deserve more. Maybe we try to get the referent other to increase their inputs by encouraging them to work harder. Again, remember that's effort. Working harder has to do with intensity. That might be pretty tough though, right? So maybe instead what we do is we just reduce our own input. So we might deliberately put forth less effort at work or reduce the quality of our work so that again, our ratios can balance. Maybe we'll try to increase our own outcomes by negotiating a raise for ourselves. Maybe we just decide, I'm going to compare myself to somebody else who's not doing better than I am. Or maybe we just leave the situation, we just quit our job. Or if our inequity has to do with, for example, our gender or our sexual orientation or our age, well, maybe under those circumstances, we sue the company, file a complaint to try and address that inequity. People respond differently to inequity. Most people will respond as I have described. They are what we call equity sensitive, which means we care about whether we're being treated fairly. It's a big deal. We want that ratio to be equal. People who are benevolent, on the other hand, will be okay when an inequity does not work in their favor. They'll just decide, well, that's okay. I really like that other person, or I'm just okay with not being treated fairly. Entitled people, on the other hand, well, they expect to always get more than they're actually worth. They just figure they're worth it. They deserve it because they're them. They're entitled. Beyond thinking about just equity, we can also think about justice. And there are three kinds of justice that derive as their source equity theory. Distributive justice refers to the degree to which we perceive the outcomes we receive are fair. So what we get seems just. The pay that we get seems just. The perks that we have seem just. The praise that we receive, all of that seems fair. We're okay with the 3% raise that we got. Procedural justice refers to the process that's used to arrive at those decisions. So we believe that the process used by our boss, by all of the leadership within the organization, we believe that process is fair. And then finally, there's interactional justice, which deals with how we're treated in general. Are we treated respectfully, with kindness? Are we treated as though we have dignity? When the answer is yes, well, then we would say that interactional justice was happening. So distributive justice might have to do with the grade that we get in a class. Does it seem like it's fair, given the amount of effort that we put into the class, for example? Do we think that the B we got in the class was fair? Procedural justice would relate to how the professor graded. Did the criteria make sense? Did the professor actually take into account the work that we had put into whatever the assignment might be. That's all procedural justice. And then interactional justice would be, do we feel like the professor treats us with kindness, with courtesy? Okay, hopefully all of those make sense. Let's talk about a second process-based. So first process-based theory, equity theory. Now we're going to talk about Vroom's expectancy theory of motivation. The overarching idea with this one is that motivation depends on how much we want something and how likely we think we are to get that something. Key components. There are 4. Starting with what's called valence. This is the degree of attractiveness or unattractiveness, the value that a particular outcome or reward has for a given person. So we acknowledge that each of us might value outcomes or rewards differently. Something that has a lot of value for me, that's really attractive to me, yeah, you might not care about it all. Likewise, something that has a lot of value for you as an outcome, yeah, maybe I don't care about that. So we have different valence for a given outcome. Outcome is anything that results from performing a behavior. Could be pay, could be a promotion, could be some other kind of reward, could be praise, any of those things. Instrumentality, this captures the relationship between performance and outcome. This is the perceived probability or odds that our performance will actually lead to expected or certain outcomes. Okay, this is all going to make more sense when I go to the next slide. The last component is expectancy. This is effort to performance. This is the perceived probability or odds that our effort will lead to the desired performance. So let's look at the next slide. And I'm going to unpack this. And the first thing I want you to recognize is that we cannot read what you see here, this model. We cannot read this left to right. We cannot go here and then here and then here. Nope, that's the wrong way to look at this model. Instead, we have to start on the right. And we start with the outcome and the valence that a given person attaches to that outcome. So the first thing that a person thinks about is, do I value, do I want that reward or outcome? Do I care about the possible bonus that I might get if I achieve a certain sales goal? Do I care about that bonus? Do I care about that prize? Do I value that reward? Is my valence high or not? If the answer is nope, guess how much effort a person is going to put forth? If they don't value or attach high valence to the outcome, the reward that's being dangled out there, if they don't care about it, how much effort do you think that person would exert? If you're thinking none or hardly any, you're right. If a person doesn't value, doesn't place high valence on a given reward or outcome, yeah, they're not going to put forth much effort. This is the first thing that people think about. They think about, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Is it going to be worth my time, my effort, all my inputs to actually work hard to achieve the goal? Am I even going to care about the reward? If the answer is no, you shouldn't expect much in the way of effort. Notice who is assigning the valence. It's not the boss. It's the employee. It's the follower, not the leader. Are you with me? Doesn't matter if, as the boss, you think something is great. If your employee doesn't think it's great, it's irrelevant. So that's the first thing, valence. The second thing that matters is this performance to outcome instrumentality. So working our way from right to left, Here's outcome. Here's performance. So performance to outcome instrumentality. Do I believe that the performance will actually lead to the promised reward? In other words, if I achieve, let's say, a given sales goal, if I achieve it, that's the performance, am I actually going to get the promised bonus? Now you might think to yourself, well, why wouldn't that always be true? Well, guess what? Sometimes in organizations, we do what we're supposed to do and we don't get the reward that we thought we would get. Bosses can lie. Organizations can fail to follow through on their promises. If that's happened in the past, where a person was promised a particular reward and then they didn't get it, guess what that does to their future instrumentality? Well, it's going to decrease it, right? The odds, their perceived odds that that reward will actually come their way is going to be down. Okay, continuing to work from right to left. Over here, we have effort to performance expectancy. Here's effort, here's performance. So this is, let's say, again, a sales goal. The expectancy says, do I believe that I can exert enough effort to yield the desired performance? In other words, do I think I can work hard enough, long enough to achieve the sales goal that's been set for me? If I know that the goal that's been set is, let's say, 3 or 4 times higher than I have ever achieved in the past, even when I have worked my hardest, well, guess what? I'm probably going to decide that the odds, the expectancy, is going to be low. So what do we expect then in terms of effort? What do you think? It's going to be low, right? If I don't think that no matter how hard I work, I can get to a particular goal, yeah, I'm probably not going to work that hard. All right, so let's use an example. Let's say over here, again, we'll do like a sales example. The reward that's being dangled in front of you is a cruise. Now, I don't know if a cruise is something that has value for you. It has no value for me. None. I wouldn't ever want to win a cruise. I couldn't care less about going on a cruise. So if I was offered a cruise, I can tell you right now, right out of the gate, I'm not going to exert a whole lot of effort. I don't want to win that prize. I don't want that prize. But maybe you do. In fact, let's say that you do. A cruise is something, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a cruise to Alaska or something. That sounds really appealing to you. Awesome. Then there's this instrumentality piece. And so the question is, do you believe that if you hit the sales goal, you'll actually get that reward? Well, in your experience, your boss tends to follow through on their promises. So your instrumentality is high. Maybe for me, my boss has a history of lying, of not following through, of promising things and then failing to deliver. Well, then my instrumentality is going to be low. In your case, because your instrumentality is high, we would expect you to work pretty hard because you really believe that if you hit the goal, you're going to get that reward. Oh, and remember, you want that reward. Whereas in my case, I'm pretty sure that my boss isn't going to follow through. Even if I hit that sales goal, yeah, I'm not going to get that reward. And I don't want that reward anyway. So my effort's probably going to be pretty low. The last connection, the expectancy. You've actually hit that same sales goal in the past. You know exactly what you need to do in terms of effort, and it strikes you as a reasonable level. So you're going to exert that much effort because you believe that the odds are in your favor. That, yeah, you can exert sufficient effort to achieve that sales goal, which will get you that cruise that you actually want. Again, we would expect a pretty high level of effort out of you. In my case, let's say that I've never hit that sales goal in the past, even when I've tried pretty hard. I'm just not very good at Selling. At least the thing that we're selling. I'm not very good at it. So I look at that sales goal and I go, yeah, that is totally not doable for me, man. I cannot do it. What would we predict in terms of effort? Not very good. Not for me anyway. For you? Yep, on point. For me, not so much. Okay. So how can we influence these three pieces? I'm going to start over here on the right. You're a boss now. You're a boss. How can you try to influence these three perceptions for your employees? Valence. Well, first of all, find rewards that they actually want, that are in fact desirable to those employees. Figure out what they want, ask them perhaps, and try to deliver on that. Next, make sure that the rewards are actually viewed as fair. And then finally, give employees some choice over their rewards. Give them some options from which they may choose. That way, you'll be assured that what they've selected is something they actually care about. With respect to instrumentality, make sure that you consistently actually reward performance. When people achieve the desired level of performance, follow through on your promises. Make sure they actually get the rewards that you have told them about. And make sure to inform people in advance about those rewards. Let them know what's in it for them. Finally, with expectancy, make sure your people actually have the skills, the abilities, the knowledge they need in order to achieve the desired performance. Ensure that the environment facilitates that performance. Remember what that environment includes. It includes resources, it includes information, it includes support. Make sure that all three are there: resources, information, and support. And then finally, encourage your people. Let them know that you believe in them, that you have faith in them. This is part of support also, right? Let them know that you're there if they need you so that they can, in fact, achieve the desired performance and then get that reward. All right. Final process-based theory, reinforcement theory. Most people are very familiar with the idea of positive reinforcement. This makes perfect sense to us. This is when a person engages in positive behavior and then they get positive consequences. You do a good job, you get praised. You do a good job, you get a bonus. You do a good job, you get a raise. You do a good job, you get a window office. Everybody with me? You do good things, you get something good. Negative reinforcement is also a positive. Oh, this hurts your brain, right? How do you know it's a positive? Because of the use of the word reinforcement. So the person does a good job, the manager stops nagging them. They take away something negative. You do a good job, your boss tells you you get to leave early on Friday. You do a good job, your boss says, you don't have to work on that one project that I know you were dreading having to work on. You do a good job, you no longer have to work with someone who drives you crazy. Is everybody tracking with me? So you do something good and something bad is taken away. Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff. So the top two things, these are when you do something good. Okay. But what about when you do something bad? For example, you steal. Maybe it's just time that you're stealing, but nonetheless, it's still something that matters, right? You're on your phone, you're surfing the web, you're goofing off, you're talking to other people, you're stealing time. Okay. How should we deal with it? Well, there are two approaches. One is punishment and one is extinction. So let's say that, We have to come up with something that's really significant, right? Some negative behavior that's really significant. Let's say that, again, you're caught stealing. Let's say it's an actual thing that you're stealing from the work setting, and your boss wants to punish you. Well, I'm going to tell you in a minute what it's going to take in order for that punishment to work. Basically, punishment is you do something bad and there are negative consequences. Okay? And again, I'll talk more about that in just a bit. Before I do that, though, let me talk about extinction. Extinction is actually the better way to deal with employees doing something bad. Let's say that one of the bad things you do is you distract other people by, let's say, sending texts that are funny or forwarding emails that are funny. One of the best ways to stop that behavior, which is counterproductive behavior, is for the manager to ignore that behavior. Or let's imagine that you're in a meeting with other coworkers and you're that person who always cuts other people off. You're always doing it. You just jump in. You just jump in. You put your hand up constantly. Call on me, call on me, call on me, call on me. And you like immediately. The boss has barely gotten the question out of their mouth and you're like, me, me, me. Okay, well, that's obnoxious, right? Nobody likes that. Perhaps the best way to stop that behavior is for the manager to simply ignore you, to not call on you, to not give you the positive reinforcement of calling on you. So the manager seeks to extinguish the negative behavior by taking away the positive consequence that has been reinforcing that behavior. I hope that makes sense. Let me talk more about punishment, this punishment work. Right now, what I want you to do is think about a time in your life when you were punished for having done something bad and it actually worked. Now, let me clarify what I mean by that. Actually worked means you never, ever, ever did that bad thing again. Ever. So give this some thought. Imagine the Jeopardy music playing in the background. A time when you were punished where it actually worked. Meaning you never did that bad thing again. Now, I'll bet some of you have been able to think of something. And I'll bet others are still puzzling. Here's the issue. Punishment often does not work. It doesn't work because three conditions have to be true in order for it to work. But before I dive into those, let me give you an example of myself and punishment not working. So when I was a kid, I went to Catholic school. And no worries if you're not Catholic. You don't need to be in order to understand this example. In attending Catholic school, we went to, starting in fourth grade, so when I was 9 years old, we went to confession, what was called confession, and now it's called reconciliation. We went to confession once a month. We would sit down with a priest, we would say some prayers, and then we would identify the three things that we had done, the three bad things that we had done over the past month that we wanted forgiveness for. So basically, our three big sins. And pretty much every month, I would go in with the same three big sins, the exact same ones, exact same ones. Now, remember what I said about punishment. In order to say that it's worked, it means that we'd never do that bad thing again. Okay? Otherwise, it hasn't worked. If we do it again, it hasn't worked. The punishment hasn't worked. Okay, so here's what I did. I would say, well, here are my three sins. So I want you to imagine what those might be. Let's see if you can guess. Okay, I'll give you 15 seconds to think about this. Okay, so one of them, every month I fought with my younger brothers and sisters. Every single month I had to bring that one up. A second one, every single month I had to say that I sassed back. I talked back to my mother. And the third, can you guess what the third was? What I did every single month? Swearing. Every single month. The exact same three things. Fighting with my brothers and sisters, talking back to my mother, swearing. And every month I would get the exact same penance or punishment. And here it was. I had to say 3 Hail Marys and 3 Our Fathers. That was it. 3 Hail Marys, 3 Our Fathers. How long do you think it took me to say 3 Hail Marys and 3 Our Fathers? Well, I'll do a quick demo for you. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. There's one Hail Mary. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Do you see? You see where I'm going with this? 3 Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys. Boom, boom, boom. Less than 5 minutes. Back in business, baby. Here's the issue. In order for punishment to work, 3 conditions have to be true. Number 1, the punishment must be immediate. You engage in the negative behavior, the punishment has to happen right away. Second, the punishment has to be intense. Can't be a little like this. It has to be intense. And third, the punishment has to be impersonal, meaning the same punishment is applied to whomever commits the crime, whoever does the bad thing. Okay? These 3 things fit what we call the hot stove rule. So if you were to put your hand on a hot burner, ow, the punishment would be immediate as soon as you put your hand on that burner. It would be intense. Ow, that hurts. And impersonal. Same punishment no matter who puts their hand on that burner. Well, having to say 3 Hail Marys and 3 Our Fathers, yeah, not immediate, first of all, okay? Not intense. And maybe impersonal. Maybe the same punishment was given out to everybody who did these things, but who cares? The punishment was neither immediate nor intense, so it was never going to make any difference. It wasn't. Now let me go back to the previous slide. I want to talk about extinction again very briefly and talk about extinction working on me when I was a kid. So one of the things I did when I was a kid, I wasn't proud of it, don't get me wrong. I stole candy from our local candy store. I went with my best friend at the time. His name was Todd. Todd and I went into this candy store and we, looked at the candy like we usually did and bought some candy. Left the store. We're walking home, and my house was 2 blocks away from the candy store. I mean, the store sold other things. It was a small corner store, but I went there for candy. Okay. Back in the day when you could go in with a quarter and leave with a bag full of candy because candy was either a penny or 2 pennies a piece. Anyway, we're walking back home and we're halfway down the first block. And I say to Todd, guess what I did? Now, here's what I'm expecting. I had taken a gumball, one gumball wrapped in a plastic wrapper, and I was expecting Todd to be pretty impressed with me. I was expecting praise, quite frankly. After I had done this bad thing, I was expecting to be like, whoa, Lucy, that's pretty awesome. How'd you get away with that? How'd you do that? Right? So this is what I was expecting. So I tell him, guess what I did? And he guesses or whatever, or I just told him, and he said, "Why did you do that?" Instead of getting praise as I expected, his response, my best friend's response, was, "Why did you do that?" Observe what's happening here. I was expecting something positive after I'd done something negative, and he just took that away. He didn't punish me. He didn't yell at me. There was no immediate, intense. He just took away the praise that I was expecting. He just took it away. Extinction. Do you think that I did much in the way of stealing after that incident? Nope. I was mortified. I was embarrassed. I had completely misjudged what I thought would be true. Again, I thought I would get praise, and instead, I got a question. Why did I do that? Oof. All right, so back through punishment. Again, remember, it's only going to work if it's immediate, intense, and personal. Timing is everything with reinforcement. I won't read this slide to you. This is something I'd like you to take the time to read yourself. Basically, that when rewards happen, when reinforcement, remember, reinforcement is either positive or negative. When that happens matters, whether it's continuously or on a ratio schedule or on an interval schedule, which could be either fixed or variable. Are you with me? So read this over, look at the examples. I'm sure they'll make great sense to you. So let's do the wrap. The very last slide, part 3 of 3. Key takeaways when we talk about motivation. Number 1, people want to do good work. They do. This is theory Y. People are motivated by different factors. All the need-based theories tell us this, whether it's Maslow's or Herzberg or McClellan. What makes you and I tick varies. It's different. Third, rewards must have value to the person doing the good work. This is right out of expectancy theory. Valence varies by the person. That which makes me excited to work might not make you excited to work. For you, maybe it's money. Me, not so much. So as a manager, as a leader, we've got to figure out, what do our employees want? Further, those rewards must be tied to performance. Equity theory tells us this. Expectancy theory tells us this. Next, people have to believe that they can exert the needed effort, that they can, if they work hard enough, they'll get to the goal. They have to believe that. Otherwise, they won't put forth the effort. Expectancy theory tells us this. Fairness matters. Adults care about fairness. At least most of us do. We are equity sensitive. And as a result, when you're a boss, you have to not just think about what does each individual employee value, what do they want in terms of rewards, but also, are you treating people fairly? Distributive fairness, right? Justice, distributive justice, procedural justice, and interactional justice. All 3 matter. And then finally, people respond to perceived consequences. This is reinforcement theory. If people expect that when they do something good, they're either going to get something good, that's positive reinforcement, or something bad's going to be taken away, that's negative reinforcement. Or if they do something bad, they're going to be punished, or the manager will respond in such a way as to extinguish that negative behavior. Well, people respond to this stuff. So we need to keep this in mind. So of all the things that we might study about motivation, these are the things that I most want you to remember. And that brings us to the end of part 3 of chapter 5.